Good morning, children. Welcome back to your computer class. By now, I think all of you know about the different parts of a computer. You know how to identify it, right? So we have the monitor, mouse, keyboard, and CPU.
And now, who is this? This is the CPU and it is considered to be the most important part of a computer. And what is the full form? The CPU stands for Central Processing Unit. Repeat with me, Central Processing Unit. So the first letter of each word, with that we form the word CPU. So CPU stands for Central Processing Unit and it is the most important part of a computer. Why do we call it most important part? Because like in your body, who gives the instructions to the different parts of your body? Suppose your hands have to write something in your notebook. So the brain instructs your hands to pick up the pencil and write in your notebook. The brain instructs your eyes to look at the board or look at some other book and take those words and then you write in your notebook. So the brain is the most important part of our body. Similarly, in a computer also, the CPU gives the directions. It controls the different parts of the computer. So that is why we even call the CPU as the brain of the computer. It is called the brain of the computer. Now, when we talk about the CPU, it is a small component. It is not the entire box that you are able to see here. So, the CPU component is inside the CPU box. So, we can refer to the box as both a CPU box and also a CPU. At your level, that is fine. So it is CPU box and the CPU box we can also call as the cabinet because the CPU box contains certain other components also apart from the CPU. So please remember the CPU is the most important part of a computer. It is called the brain of the computer. It is inside the CPU box. And the CPU box is called as the cabinet. And the most important thing, the CPU stands for Central Processing Unit. Let us now see what are the basic components of a CPU box. So the most important component is the power button. So with the power button, you can switch on and switch off a computer. And when you switch on the computer, there is a small light which is close to the power button which comes on. Now in different companies, the CPU box looks different. So it varies from company to company and in even each company there are different models. But basically we should know that there is a power button on every CPU box and there is a light which blinks once you switch on the power button. You then have the CD player. I think you must have noticed when your parents want to play some music or some other movies, for example, they use a CD, a circular shaped object. Yes, so that is basically called as storage device. It is for storing information. So the CD is placed in a CD player. Next we have the USB port. Now, like we said that a CD is a storage device where you store information. Similarly, you can store information on something called as a pen drive, a flash drive, or a USB drive. So this is basically, you must have generally used or heard the term pen drive. So this pen drive is also used to store information, and you can connect it to the CPU using the USB port. Apart from that, we have another option, another two areas where you can use it for audio port. So in that, suppose you want to connect your headphones or you want to connect your speaker to the computer, then you can use that audio port for doing that. And finally, we have the CPU. As we mentioned earlier, the CPU is a small component which is inside the CPU box. But though it is small, it does big tasks. Yes, it controls the entire computer. So the components of a CPU box are the power button, the CD player, the USB port, the audio port, and the CPU. Now, let's do some true and false questions. So T for true and F for false. We have to write that. So the first question is, a monitor is called the brain of the computer. Is it true or false? Yes, it is false. Why? Because the CPU is called the brain of the computer, not a monitor. The second question is, buttons on the mouse are called keys. So this is also false. Why is it false? Because the buttons on the keyboard are called keys, not on the mouse. The third question is, a keyboard shows the work we do on the computer. So this is also false. So which part shows the work? The monitor. So the monitor shows the work we do on the computer. So this third question is also false. Next question is, we use a mouse to point and select things on the monitor. Absolutely right. So it is true. The answer is true. The last question is, a CPU looks like a TV. The answer here is false. Which looks like a TV? The monitor looks like a TV. So that answer is also false. So let's do another activity. So we have to rearrange the letters to get the names of the computer parts. So in the first one, there are two words. So in the first word, the letters given are C-U-P, and in the second word, it is given as B-O-X. Now look at the picture and identify. Yes, it is the CPU box. So the next question, the letters given are N-O-N-I-T-O-R. So we need to rearrange it, and from the picture we know that it is a monitor. In the third
question, we have SOUME. So the picture says that it is a mouse. And the fourth picture we have BEYKOARD, and we know that the picture is of a keyboard. So now let's go through the spellings. So the first one is CPU and box, BOX. The second one is MONITOR, monitor. The third, MOUSE, mouse. And the fourth, KEYBOARD, keyboard. So now we have a fun activity. You can collect pictures of the parts of a computer from any magazine or newspaper, and in your book, in the space which is given, you can stick those pictures in that space. Those who do not have access to a book can stick the pictures in your notebook. So now in Wordpad, you will use your keyboard and type these two sentences about the CPU which we learned today. CPU stands for Central Processing Unit. And the second sentence is, it is called the brain of the computer. Wherever there are capital letters, use capital letters, full stops, numbers, use it appropriately when you are typing. With that, children, we come to the end of today's class. Thank you and have a good day.